seemed like everything was going really perfectly for a good chunk of the front of that game. Was there anything in particular that the Bills started doing differently, or how did that kind of morph into what ended up happening?
Combination of things. I think certainly early in the game, guys were making plays. We had some open looks. The run game was working, hit some explosives, and we were able to get in the end zone, which we were really excited to start like that. Do I think they made major adjustments? No. I think a combination of play calling and execution obviously didn't go quite as well as we wanted to in the second half. And I think typically in the flow of an NFL game that there's always that, give and take, whether it's a start slow, finish fast. There's going to be lulls at some point. And unfortunately, we weren't able to get it back going at the end there well enough to win the game, but was encouraged that the guys kept fighting and put ourselves in position to almost get it done there.
Obviously, a lot of underneath passing with what they were giving you and with the wind. Do you like what you did kind of with that underneath passing game, or did you feel, looking back at the film, maybe that there was opportunity to do more downfield?
A little bit of both, probably. The wind definitely was a factor. What they were doing coverage-wise is going to play into that. We had some opportunities for some catch and runs, which was good. You're trying to push the ball down the field, and if it's not there, I love the fact that Kyler was quick to get the ball underneath and give guys the opportunity to run with the ball. So I'd say a combination.
Drew, how surprised were you when you looked at Marvin's stat line at the end of the game? Just what it was.
I think I certainly, as a play caller, you feel that throughout the game. I think a number of things they were doing coverage-wise, I was a little bit surprised with how much respect they gave him early in the game, and I think it opened up some things, especially in the red zone in the run game. He's one of our top players. Certainly he's on the forefront of our mind in terms of getting him the ball, and I think they did some good things to take him away, and certainly could have called some plays differently to try to get him a little bit more involved early. But I thought it was a good start, and certainly we got some work to do moving into week 2.
We haven't seen him drop a pass like that all training camp, I think. Do you think that was just nerves, or what do you maybe attribute that to early on?
Honestly, he would be able to answer that better than me. It's not something I'm worried about. I can promise you that. So don't really know.
After that drop, I believe it was JG said that wasn't a scripted play. Kyler just found Marvin. Is there any extra desire, maybe you think, from a quarterback of, okay, he just had that drop, let's kind of get him back in the game and look for him, or is that just the way it kind of came to be?
I'd like to say it's just the way it kind of came to be. I think one of the things that, I really try to stress with Kyler is, it's not his job to get certain people the ball or worry about how a guy's doing in the flow of the game. I got to do that with the way that I call the game, and he's got to make the best decision based on the look, the coverage, the way the routes are run. So I think that just came up that way. I think that's pretty consistent with how we do things. Now, are a lot of the passes called with him kind of early in the thought process? Absolutely. So I think that just sometimes it comes up and sometimes it doesn't. And I've said this before. Sometimes you can call 10 plays for a guy and he gets the ball 10 times. Other times you call 10 plays for him and he gets the ball none. And that's just kind of the nature of the NFL game. So I wouldn't say that was a forefront of his mind, I don't think, in that second play.
One of the points of discussion has often been the last year or so being under center with Kyler. I think in the first half it was a little under 25% of the snaps. Second half, there were no snaps under center. In your mind, what was the reason that happened?
I don't think, again, that was intentional. When I go to call a play or design a play, I rarely think one way or the other. A lot of times it's involved in where we want the back relative to how it affects the front or the coverage or his check down in the passing game. So Kyler's really good under center. He's really good in the gun, in the pistol. So it rarely plays into my thought process in terms of the way we do things, in terms of how I call the game.
Can you expand a little bit on how Marvin's presence affected the offense for everybody else on Sunday?
Yeah, I think a number of times, he's going to get, what we call cloud or two-man coverage, where guys are putting one underneath, one over the top, really trying to take him out of the game at times. And certainly now they're playing 10 guys with 9. So obviously, there's a little bit more space in the running game. You're getting some more one-on-ones in other areas. I think that's the nature, and sometimes it's intentional based on player. Sometimes, look, they're a shell team, and they like to roll both directions to keep the offense off balance, and it happened to be to his side. So I think it's a combination of those things, but it certainly provides opportunity and space for other players to go make plays, and I thought you saw that throughout the game, certainly early in the game, and then, obviously not as well late in the game for a number of reasons.
He had 11 routes with man coverage. I think out of 33-ish. Is that kind of what you're expecting to see going forward, that kind of split?
I think every game's going to come up different based on who they have and how well they feel about their matchup. Hey, if we have an elite corner, they may not do that, or if they're struggling or they're banged up. I think so many things go into that. So I think it's important for us to have a plan for both. Hey, if it's single the whole game, if he's double the whole game, if they're doing this, if they're doing that, I think that's the nature of having a good game plan, to be able to adjust once you see how they want to react as that game gets going.
Kyler finished with an average of more than 3 seconds to hang on to the ball, which was most in week 1 across the league. What positives do you take away from the offensive line, especially having to add in Beachum when Jonah went out?
I think you hit on it. I mean, certainly you saw him extend plays, make plays with his feet, make plays late in the down. I think the offensive line has a huge role in that. I mean, continuing to finish the play. You know, there's that feeling of, oh, the ball should be out, the play's over. Like in our world with Kyler, quarterback, that's never the case. So I think it's something we stress in practice, we stress in the meeting room, and I think it was good to see those guys continue to work, continue to play at that level to buy that time and create that space for him.
If Beach has to play more, what's the challenge for him, and how much will just the reps this week in practice help in that regard?
Yeah, he's a guy who's always ready. I mean, at this point, you know, he's seen so much football. He has such great experience to pull from. So I think he's the type of guy, whether it's in a starting role, in a backup role, whenever he goes in the game, I think mentally he's very prepared. He has a great process throughout the week. You know, he's a guy that I lean on sometimes, or, hey, like, how's the plan? Do you feel like we have enough in? Do you feel like the things are making sense? It's clicking in your brain. So I have no doubt if he's the guy that's called up to play that he's going to do it at a high level.
When Marvin did have opportunities, did you feel like his routes were as sharp as you would have liked to see in terms of creating separation?
Yeah, I thought it was a good start. You know, certainly had some opportunities to get in the ball. You know, other times, as we said, they were taking him away. But, you know, it's his first game. I think he got some things out of the way. And certainly there were some nerves there. Plus, you know, obviously just a new opponent and a new coverage. So was pleased with that. You know, certainly want him to have more production. And a lot of that's going to come from me and not him.
Looking ahead to the Rams game, how different is it as you're starting to watch film, knowing that you don't have to scheme up against a guy like Aaron Donald?
It makes a big difference. I mean, certainly, you know, he is arguably the best ever. And I think that's real. So there's part of that process. You know, that being said, the guys that they have on that D-line are still pretty good. I mean, that's probably the strength of the unit, arguably the strength of that team. So I think it's something we still have to be very aware of. It's just more a little bit of by committee talent maybe than one like, oh, my God, player. But it's a pretty good group. Still going to be a good challenge for us, I think, this week.
You have a different focus than fans, obviously, but is it fair? Yes. Is it fair when you come out of a game like that? Is it fair to expect Marvin to get more than one catch in a game?
Yeah, I think generally that's the plan. I think at the end of the day, the only thing we are worried about is winning the game. And at the end of the day, if we're doing that, great. If we're not, we didn't get the job done. So I think that's always going to be the mindset. And then we're going to go back and look at the tape and say, hey, did we get our best players the opportunities that we could have based on what they were doing? Is there more we could have done? Here's how we need to move forward to do that. Or, hey, that's kind of what the game dictated. The next game is going to be something different. Let's make sure we're ready and let's sure we're going with a good plan.
In the second half, was there a thought to getting more involved closer to the line of scrimmage, or did you kind of like the way that he was taking away 2 defenders on deep routes?
Say that again, sorry.
In the second half, a lot of his routes were deeper down the field. Did you like the way that he was, you know, as you said, affecting the defense by doing that, or was there a thought to get him involved closer to the line of scrimmage on some short?
A little bit of both, and I think you saw that. You know, obviously the catch he had after the drop was closer to the line of scrimmage. I think a lot of that's going to be dictated by the entire coverage that we're trying to attack, where we feel like, hey, if we get the one-on-one, we like the deep ball. If we don't, he's taking 2 guys out of the equation. So I think that can be a mix throughout the second half.
What do you think his offense is? I mean, after the success you had early on and then not being able to finish, how did you see it as a whole?
As you said, I think it was a good start. I think the thing that we preach and the thing that we need to work towards is consistency, that we don't have lulls, that we don't have halves like we did in the second half where we kind of, you know, a couple 3-and-outs, a turnover. Like, that can't be our calling card. We need to put it together 4 quarters if we're going to go win games, and we weren't able to do that. So I think that's going to be the focus here this week, is just trying to find that consistency and make sure that we're doing the things that put ourselves in a position to have those 2 quarters for 4.
There's been after watching it, guys have a better understanding of it. Now that you got to see it for the first time, you know, in a game, do you feel like guys have a good understanding of where it's at?
Yes and no. I think there's so much that goes into it. Some of that's my play calling. Like, I got to do a better job of getting those guys in position, getting those guys opportunities in the second half to go make plays. You know, it's one of those things you kind of get that first down and you get going. And the drive that we were able to do that in the second half, we went down and got points. You know, so I think that's a big part of it. Certainly there's going to be some plays that those guys want back from an execution standpoint as well. So I think the guys have a really good idea of what we want to be and how we want to play on offense. And I think as a play caller and as individuals, as players, there's certainly things that we're going to say, hey, I can be better. We need to be better. And I think that's kind of our focus going into week 2.
So much of the focus and questions have been about Marvin, but of course Michael Wilson didn't have any targets. Trey McBride had a bunch, but didn't hit them all, and he only averaged like 6 yards per reception. Any overall evaluation of how that all came to be, or is it just pretty much what you've been talking about?
I think it's a lot about what I've been talking about. Certainly, you know, I'd love to come out of the game with 400 yards passing, 250 yards rushing, and everybody has 10 targets. You know, I think that's real. But I think we also need to look at, all right, hey, why did that happen? Was it dictated by how we called the game? Was it dictated by the look? Was it dictated by execution? So that, you know, we can fix some of those things and put up more points. I mean, ultimately, that's the goal. And we didn't score enough on Sunday. So whatever it's going to take to get over that hump, I think we got to look at all avenues.
goes through your head when you hear media evaluations of players or specific plays? We're all guilty of it. Do you cringe? Do you laugh? Do you think you're missing so much? What are you thinking when you read or hear that stuff?
Honestly, I'd probably laugh. I mean, it's an entertainment business. I love the fact that people talk about the game and are involved in the game and love the game and want to have an opinion and get to, like, that's what makes this game special. It's what makes it fun. It's what keeps people involved. Certainly, there are times where I laugh and say, like, okay, if you were in the building and watching tape with us, you'd feel very differently, but we're not going to give you that luxury at all times. And there are other times where it's like, hey, I thought the same exact thing that guy said, So I think that you kind of hit all avenues on that standpoint. But no, it is. That's what makes this game special. I think it's why people love it and why people enjoy watching it.
James has said he likes getting hit early. That's kind of how he warms up and gets going. So to start with 7 straight run plays for him, I mean, what specific traits does James have that not all running backs might have to not only have the ability but the want to? I mean, I'm sure if every game he could start with 6 or 7 straight plays, he would ask.
I would be too, because we'd be rolling if that's the case, if we haven't punted at that point. But no, I think it's a combination of kind of his skill set, his physical tools, and his mental makeup. Like that, and I'd say most players are that way. Like really good players want the ball every play. Like I've never been around a receiver, a tight end, a back who's not like, we had 50 offensive plays, I should have touched it 50 times. Like that's how they feel. That's what makes them great. And certainly he embodies that as much as anybody.
Last week, Kyler said he's as happy as he's been in the NFL. That allows him to play free. After one game, especially that first half, how could you see that kind of in action?
Yeah, I think he loves being on the field. I think you see that at practice. I think you see that on game day. Like he loves playing the sport. I think his teammates recognize it. The game means a ton to him. He loves the competition. He loves the challenge. I think he just loves going out there and putting his ability on display. So I think that's fun to coach. It's fun to be around as a teammate and love that to continue.
Overall, how would you evaluate the offensive line and just certainly going against a pretty good defense?
Last week. Yeah, I thought they did a really nice job. As you said, that's a good front, especially inside. Those two interior players are pretty dynamic players. The edges can give you some issues, and I thought those guys, for the most part, did a great job. And we talked about the time to throw being as long as it was. I thought those guys played at a really high level. It was just the attitude, effort, energy, for most of the day, I thought was really good.
There were points in the game on the ground where it was kind of grinding 1, 2, 3 yards at a time. What do you attribute that to in the middle stretch?
I think typically if you're going to look at a good run game, that's going to, unless you're just, rushing for 250 yards a game, I think you're going to see that at times because it's one of those things, especially as you talk about James being a volume carrier. And this is true of most good run games. It's, hey, it's 3, it's 4, it's 5, and then all of a sudden it's 25. All of a sudden it's 30. I think one of the things we weren't able to do, I think that's a credit to Buffalo a little bit, is we didn't hit some of those big ones that we typically are able to hit where you're wearing some guys down, they're not pursuing as hard as they normally do on the backside, or you get a guy cut out of a gap, and all of a sudden James breaks the big one, or Kyler breaks the big one. You saw it here and there, but they were doing a good job of getting it down for 7, 8, 9 rather than 20, 25, 30, and all of a sudden you're walking out of the game with 210 yards rushing instead of what we did. I think that's real. I think there can be a number of reasons for that, but I attribute to a lot of that to the way they played and the way they were coached.
Mentioned after the game, he was asked about the late 3rd and 10 call running with James, that, well, if it popped, that question wouldn't be being asked. So what was your thought process and feeling that was a good play at that point? Yeah,
I think that's always kind of the, and I love that response from him because that's real. It's like at the end of the day, if it works, it was a good call. If it doesn't, I should have called something else. That's always going to be the case as a play caller. So I think one of the things we try to do is go back and look at, hey, was the design right? Do we believe in what we're doing and why we're doing it? Was the situation proper? Sometimes we're going to come out of those situations and say, hey, based on that situation, maybe that's not the right call. Or, hey, based on that situation, this is the right call, or that was a great call and it put us in position. Maybe we didn't execute. Maybe the time and they had the right call on. So it's a fine line. I think that's always a big part of it. There's a number of reasons for that call, and I think that's always going to be the case.
It's one of the things, too, it doesn't necessarily have to pop, but even if he gets just 3 or 4 yards more, it makes 4th down a lot different.
100%. And I think you're always trying to figure out, it's like if we threw an incomplete pass, that would have been the wrong pass, so it's like, should have run the ball. So it's you want to be careful overreacting or second guessing yourself as a play caller, as a coaching staff, as a team, but you also want to be cognizant of like, all right, let's make sure that we're doing things for the right reasons, that we have it in right, that it's installed right. Good. I think he played 8 to 10 snaps. I thought when his number was called, he did a really nice job with the ball in his hand. He had a good pickup and protection there versus a pressure. So it was really good to see. I thought it was a good start.
How often do you find yourself second guessing your calls?
I think it's one of those things, like, anytime something doesn't work, I'm going to be like, should I have done something different? I think the important part, especially when the emotion is removed from it, is evaluating it without that of like, okay, what made it right or wrong? And would I do it again based on what I knew before I made the decision? I think that's the important part. Like, hey, after I made the decision, it's easy to say, like, well, if I knew they were going to play that coverage, I would have just called the beater. Or I knew they were going to be in that front, I would have called this run. But look, if we're going to go off of expectation of what we've seen on tape, who we have in the game, the flow of the game. And so I think that is really what drives my decision. It's not necessarily like, God, that was a terrible call, although every once in a while, yeah, like I'm like, that was bad. Like I shouldn't have done that. But I think we all have that as athletes, as players, as competitors. Like nobody's ever walked out of a game and be like, I played 60 perfect snaps or I called 60 perfect plays. Like that's never going to happen. I think the important part is like, all right, why did I make the decisions I made? Am I happy with them? Where can I be better and how? I think that's kind of my process more than like second guessing a specific call in a given situation.
Are you doing that in real time or do you do that after you watch the film?
I think it's more after the tape. In game, things are happening. Now, in between series, I think at times we might have those conversations as a staff, and certainly some of those conversations take place with the players as well, of just like, hey, what are we seeing out there? How are we feeling about this or that? Little things. But for the most part, the big picture evaluation is going to come after we watch the tape.
Ready for a division rival. I mean, it's a long time between playing the Rams, but obviously 49ers and Seahawks in between. Is there an intention of keeping certain plays or looks and not using them in the first divisional matchup and not wanting to maybe show your hand in certain things, or it's really not looking that far ahead?
I think it's whatever we need to do to win the game, honestly. Now, if we get up by 45 points, yeah, we'll hide some things, we'll hold some things, but usually in the NFL you don't have that luxury. So I think at the end of the day, it's whatever it takes to win the game. That's the mindset, and then we'll reevaluate what we put on tape and try to make a good plan for the next one.